Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. The next is our second spotlight, law enforcement spotlight, except Jason was talking to the FBI. This time we're going to be talking to the U.S. Secret Service, who's also very, very active in the IR space. And conducting the Q&A will be Bret Padres, who's the CEO of Crypsis, which was just recently acquired by Palo Alto Networks for $279 million. Now, bear in mind, at the time of our first IR forum, Bret had just taken over Crypsis, which was comprised of about 12 employees, Bret? I might be overstating, 12 employees. So in 3 years, Bret has created this blockbuster company. He's really the Bill Gates of the incident response industry. And what makes him a cyber expert is not just that he has more than 25 years of experience in IR, including as special agent in the U.S. Air Force Office of Special Investigations, OSI, Chief of Research and Development in the Computer Crimes Unit for the Postal Service's IG office, and Director of Incident Response at Mandiant, and also where I first met Bret back at Strauss Friedberg. But it's also that Bret is one of the few CEO technologists who is equally comfortable running his firm or digging into a complex malware reverse engineering engagement. How many CEOs can make that claim? I guess you're not CEO now, Bret. You're what's your new title?
Group Vice President. Yep.
Okay, Group Vice President at Palo Alto Networks. What's amazing also about Bret is that he is communicating with ransomware attackers every single day. Welcome, Bret. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Excellent. And with Bret is Assistant Director for Cyber, the Office of Investigations of the United States Secret Service, Michael D'Ambrosio. He is in D.C. preparing for what, of course, will be a very challenging week for everyone here in this area. And thankfully, he's on the job helping us all. What makes him a cyber expert, what makes Director D'Ambrosio a cyber expert, is not just that he helps lead the 162 field offices of the U.S. Secret Service protecting our financial system on 40 electronic crime task forces and 46 financial crime task forces, but it's also that Director D'Ambrosio has been helping keep us all safe since 1991, when he was a platoon commander in the Marine Corps and has dedicated his professional life to protecting us all. And on top of all of that, he also has a CISO certificate from Carnegie Mellon. So thanks, Assistant Director D'Ambrosio, for devoting the 30 years of service to keeping us all safe. We appreciate it. We think you're fantastic, and we want to welcome you today to the IR Forum.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, Bret, take it away. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you, John. And thank you for everybody joining us virtually. And a big thank you to Mike for agreeing to participate in this Q&A one-on-one. And so I have some questions, and hopefully we'll learn a lot more about the Secret Service and their, how they can help here and their role. Especially want to thank you, with everything you have going on and how busy it is just days before the inauguration. So thank you.
Thank you, Bret. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I have the Q&A window open here. So if people have questions they want to throw out there, I'll keep an eye on it and try to throw them in. I think we're going to have time to take some questions, so please use that. Although if we don't have any questions, maybe I'll just tell funny stories about John Stark or something. So we'll see. All right. So Mike, it might be helpful, with the, myriad of local, state, federal law enforcement agencies, where really does the Secret Service fit? Let's just start with like cybercrime in general. Where do they really fit?
Yeah. So listen, what I like to start with is that Secret Service was created in 1865, right, to protect the U.S. Financial payment system. At that time, the threat was counterfeit. Okay. Over the years, we picked up our protective mission, and it gives us what we now call our integrated mission between protective responsibilities and financial crime. Now, Secret Service, we really focused on that financial crime area, protecting the financial sector. Well, the financial sector became digitized first, right? They're the ones leading the way as far as digitization and the use of everyday activities. So in 1995, we created what John talked a little bit about was our electronic crimes task force, right? And really what it recognized was those criminal activities that were being conducted in the cyberspace, okay? And so that emphasis was on financial crimes. What I try and say to people now is I look at cyber as a domain. It's a place. It's much more involved in our everyday lives. We need it to do anything that we do today, right? Today we're doing grocery shopping by Instacart, right? Almost anything we do has some sort of technology nexus to it. And so I've sort of expanded here, or try to expand the thinking in that cyber's a place, it's a domain. We need to operate in that domain. The Secret Service is going to do what we've done since 1865, really focus on complex cyber-enabled fraud. A lot of that today is really taking place across the globe. We have many individuals, right, that take advantage of the fact that they can target our financial institutions, right, our retail industry from outside the boundaries of the U.S., making it difficult for us to bring them to justice. And then we work with our other partners to close the loop in all those other criminal activities that take place in the cyber domain.
Well, great, that's helpful. And so then specifically with the topic today of ransomware, where does Secret Service fit specifically with helping with, fighting ransomware?
Yeah. So as a whole, the way we look at things, I'm going to go back to our concept with our electronic crimes task force, which is really built on an integrated approach to addressing a complex problem, right? As things become more digitized, it becomes more complex for individuals to understand and defend against. And the Secret Service, we prize ourselves on building relationships and partnerships. We created the Electronic Crimes Task Force to work with the victims, right? To work with other partners, academia, state and locals, to address this challenge. Now, where we fit with ransomware, in that is we take an approach, a criminal justice approach to this, right? If you want to stop crime, you got to do sort of three things. You have a victim, a vulnerable victim. You got to build the resiliency of that. We do that through top discussions like today, education, building best practices, right? Mm-hmm. You want to address the environment that these individuals work in, right? Making it harder for these groups to conduct their activities, working to change different laws, working across the boundaries internationally for collaboration. And then the last thing is strategically targeting those groups and offenders that are committing these crimes and taking off the biggest offenders of this activity. The last thing we do is we really have struck up a great partnership with the FBI. And so the Secret Service looks at ransomware a little bit as a financial crime. Most people commit a ransomware as what? For a payment. It's a ransom. Somebody's got to get paid. And so we take a very follow the money approach to the ransomware victim. We tie that in at the NCIJTF, the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force with the FBI, so that they're working some of these groups and these international actors and bring it all together, to sort of help solve the problem.
Interesting. I know that a lot of times we hear from victims of ransomware that they're struggling with, should they work with law enforcement? Are you experiencing that? And what do you say to those that might be hesitant to pick up the phone and call you guys?
Yeah, so I guess I try and do this, right? I didn't start my career in cyber. I was a Marine infantry platoon commander. The first time I saw a fax machine was when I joined the Secret Service in 1991. So technology is not sort of in my blood, right? But I had to evolve like everybody else. So I try and bring things back to outside the cyber domain. Let me ask you, Bret, if you got mugged, would you call the cops?
Yep. Yeah.
So the same thing kind of goes here. You're a victim of a crime when you've been exposed to a ransomware variant, right? And so you want to get your money back. We want to help you. We need you to call the cops, essentially, to work with us. The cops, in this case, generally speaking, are federal law enforcement, right? If I don't know that a crime was committed, I can't actively go out and work it, right? And the other piece is you have information that I need to prevent it in the future, right? And so, again, you go back, if somebody's mugged, I need a description of the individual that committed the crime. If you were a victim of ransomware, I need what was the attack vector? Is there any information? Did they give you a wallet that I can go ahead, a Bitcoin wallet or a virtual currency wallet that I can track? So I can't help with this if I don't have the collaboration of the victim.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, though, that maybe this the mugging's a good example, although I think maybe this falls in that sort of category of a crime that either people are embarrassed about or they just don't want the publicity or the things that come out of maybe losing control of the message or the data, and all that might be there around notification requirements or other things before they even really know what's happened, right? So I don't know, how would you talk to them about how you would help maybe ease their fears there?
Yeah. So keep in mind with law enforcement is that we don't comment on investigations, right? And so I don't share information on the particular investigation. I don't share information with regulators. I'm strictly there to investigate the evidence. I only want the evidence. So a lot of people will come in and say, well, we lose control of our information. Well, I can tell you today, I don't want all the information. I only want the information that are artifacts of the crime. Same thing, like when I go into a house for a victim, I don't look through the entire house. I look at the door that was broken into, or I look at those things that relate to that. So generally, ransomware, it's phishing emails, right? I don't need all the emails between the CEO maybe and the CIO discussing the ransom event, okay? Mm-hmm. I just want things that lead me for the artifacts of the crime, right? As far as payment information, I think we really need that as well. Right, so we could follow that particular money. The other thing I'll say is the only time information generally comes out, obviously, is trials and those sorts of things. And I'll tell you, I think time has, over time, what we've learned, I think the public expects that everybody today gets breached. Like, we're sort of numb to the whole breaching and cyber incidents. I think what's really more important is how you handle it. Mm-hmm. Right? And the ones that handle it well and handle it the way the individuals and their constituents believe is appropriate do very well overall. What would your thoughts on that, right?
Yeah, I think there's a misconception, right, that law enforcement just swoops in and takes over, and how disruptive that might be, and so I think that's helpful to talk about what it is you're really trying to get from their assistance. Do you think that when a victim comes to law enforcement or say the Secret Service, do you see that impacting their decision to pay it or not pay?
It's not, right? So listen, law enforcement is going to take the approach that we don't advise you to pay the particular ransom. And realistically, here's why, is that you may pay the ransom and you have to understand that you may not have your systems unlocked. If your systems were locked and the data was taken, right? You may get that back. Doesn't mean they don't have a copy. Doesn't mean that they're not going to come back and engage in some sort of blackmail later on. And to a certain extent, it only encourages these actors to continue to do so, right? They know you're vulnerable. They know that they can get money. Why would it only continues that activity? I will tell you, the ransomware threat itself has only exploded in recent years because I think people understand that it's a very successful type of crime, right? Their networks are vulnerable. I need to get my information back. Here's a way to do so, and people pay.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Are you seeing any significant trends with the threat?
Yeah, I mean, I think first, you saw ransomware targeting anybody, and it was very simple, right? You would click on a phishing email, your network was locked up, you'd pay the ransom, and maybe your network was sort of unlocked, and people would move on. Now what you're seeing is a more targeted approach where they're doing the reconnaissance within your system, they're targeting certain information, they're exfilling the information, and then they're targeting you for ransomware, right? And so, or locking your network. And so you're seeing a twofold approach to it. And so it's, hey, you got to unlock your network, but also I have your info, so you have to pay for the info in of itself to get it back. We're also seeing the trend as people sort of become aware of it, certain industries invest more money and become more hardened to the particular crime in of itself. And you're seeing them target different industries such as the healthcare network. And as we were talking about in the break, Bret, you've seen really an explosion in municipalities that are vulnerable, right? And a lot of those things are areas in which people have to make a quick decision to pay. So your 911 networks, right? Your schools right before they open, as we saw in Louisiana. So there's a lot of that where it becomes very important if you didn't establish and practice proper cyber hygiene and good order and discipline, that you'll be vulnerable to these attacks, and they've targeted and figured that out. You're also seeing, I think, this become more of a crime as a service, right? And so you're seeing the collaboration between different groups, right? Somebody that has designed the malware, somebody that has broken into a particular network, and the collaboration of that for sale.
We have a question in the chat. I just noticed it's sort of related to what we're saying, so let's throw it out there. With, that there's been discussion this morning about the legalities of payments to criminal foreign actors, and is there a difference in how law enforcement views ransomware and cyber insurance payments to bad actors, and kidnapping and insurance payments to bad actors?
No, I mean, I think it's exactly, from law enforcement perspective, and I don't work the kidnapping angle, right? So I'm not going to touch on kidnapping as a payments and crime in of itself, right? Paying the ransom in of itself is not a crime. Paying it to somebody on the OFAC list is a crime, right? Where law enforcement stands is pretty much the stance that I talked about before, right? We definitely would not encourage somebody to pay a ransom, and especially without contacting law enforcement, right? Understandably, for most businesses, it's truly a business decision, right? If your network is locked up and you're going to go out of business without getting that information back, there may have to be a business decision to pay that ransom. However, you need to be careful. You need to be careful that that money is not going to known organizations that have been on the OFAC list, right? I will tell you that if you're thinking about paying the ransom, the advice of law enforcement is contact law enforcement, right? Let us work with you within a criminal investigation to go after the bad guys. I can tell you, we started the call, this conversation a little bit about I can't work the crime if the victim doesn't provide me with the information. This is exactly the point that we're making.
Someone has a question about why aren't there more perpetrators of these crimes being brought to justice, by tracking, Bitcoins or working with other countries. And I'll throw in there too, do you have some success stories as well where, you could talk about some of the successes that you or law enforcement in general has made in bringing these perpetrators to justice? Yeah.
So I will. So first, it's difficult tracking Bitcoin. I think law enforcement is, only in the recent years starting to really understand how to track virtual currencies within the blockchain. Right? Getting better at acquiring technology, getting better at understanding it, and really focusing in that area. I will tell you that as the assistant director for the Office of Investigation of the Secret Service, tracking and going after the threat, the money, is something that we've put a lot of time and effort into. And I can tell you we've had really considerable success in certain areas of fraud, right? Keep in mind that criminals are working outside the jurisdiction of the U.S. in of itself. So take the fact that the anonymity of the internet, you're working outside the bounds of U.S. law enforcement, and generally in companies that are not cooperative with U.S. law enforcement, challenges the way we can do things. So one of the things you can do here is a couple of years ago, I want to say it was 2017, I may be a little off on that date, but the city of Atlanta was struck by a ransomware attack. Okay. Secret Service actually had been involved. We were there in our integrated mission role of protection. We had a visit of a protectee, and we were working with the local police department. We responded immediately, started doing some network forensics. CISA, Cyber Information Security Agency, was called in to help analyze the network. Secret Service was a part of the investigation. What we ended up finding that the FBI had actually targeted some of these individuals previously, right? And so between the three of us, we were able to work together to, get the city of Atlanta back up and running, right, to mitigate the attack. Secret Service tracked the virtual currency wallet in which the payment was made, tracked it back to and provided some information to the FBI, in which they were able to indict the individuals that are outside the jurisdiction of U.S. law enforcement. But there are two foreign nationals that currently have an indictment and cannot travel outside of their country to do, without being, or at least outside of their country to a country that's cooperative with the U.S. without being then brought back to the U.S. And so there are success stories. I think it's hard. I think one of the things that would help us is, again, going back to more collaboration with law enforcement, notifying us of payments to ransomware or of ransomware attacks would be extremely helpful as we try and bring these individuals to justice.
That's good. How should people be thinking? Do you have advice for anybody sort of from a prevention perspective, either working with law enforcement proactively or just general, what things would you tell them to help mitigate any threat of ransomware?
Yeah, so most of it is things that most of your chief technology officers, your chief information officers, generally speaking, should be working on, right? I like to call it, they talk about, I was a Marine infantry officer. You get in there, one of the things they stress is good order and discipline. Do the simple things, right? That, making sure things are in a certain place so you can always find them when situations go awry. Same thing here, right? So simply working on phishing attacks. Most of these crimes are being committed by phishing attacks, right? And so making sure that your employees are aware of that. They're following suspicious emails. They have a system in which to report those emails. Making sure you have a plan for backing up your systems, right? So that if your network is compromised, you can go to your backups and maybe you're not in a position where you have to pay the ransom, right? Segmenting your networks, right? What's the most critical? And placing the highest security in a segmented approach to your network. So those are the things to me that we like to talk about as far as good order and discipline, good cyber hygiene.
Thanks. And I guess in the remaining couple of minutes here, I had a question that we didn't get to, so I'll throw it out to you. How do you see these threat actors as different? Do you see them as different, who we're seeing perpetrating ransomware than maybe traditional, sort of criminals you might think of?
Well, what I think is this. I think criminals are like essentially almost good businessmen today that have sort of decentralized their operations, right? And so U.S. law enforcement, we like to bucket things into these hierarchical charts of La Cosa Nostra, right? And when you look at a transnational organized crime network, you've got the leader, and then you have his capos underneath him, and then there's soldiers, right? Today, these guys are taking advantage of the internet, the way good businesses are, to flatten their organizations. And like we talked about before, it's relationships of convenience, right? So it does make it harder to target and identify these particular relationships because you're almost going after bad actors, right? Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we like to do here is I like to target the facilitators of the crimes, right? And what I mean by that is most criminals conduct crime for money. In order to move their money, they have to use money launderers, right? That's a choke point, right? By identifying and bringing those individuals to justice, then I can go ahead and target those other individuals that are using them, those criminals, and identify more people. So I hope that answered your question, Bret.
Yeah, certainly. We know that they're getting more and more creative, and there's a lot of incentive as we see the ransomware requests are getting higher and higher for the ransoms themselves, and so it does look like they're getting very mature in their business approach to this issue, right?
Yes.
Exploitation of this issue. So. I know we're coming up on the minute, but thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me and with everybody. And thank you for all you're doing.
Oh, thank you. And to everybody there. We appreciate the time here, the time to get our message out. And what I'd recommend to individuals is if you're looking to address this particular crime and build a relationship with your local law enforcement, contact your local Secret Service office. They'll put you in touch with what we now call our counterfeit, our cyber fraud task force, to help work on those three things: building the partnerships, building the resiliency of different organizations, work on the ability to share information, and target these offenders.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.